Hi everyone, my name is Ishwar Nalamaru. I'm a senior product manager at AWS Data Protection. I have Marcos Perez with me.
Hello, I'm Marcos Perez. I'm a storage specialist SA. I work aligned with AWS Backup team.
Great. Today we're going to discuss about data protection and governance on AWS, and our specific focus would be on AWS Backup. In our day-to-day lives, we see a lot of data. For example, from the beginning of humanity to 2003, we had half a zettabyte of data. And 1 zettabyte of data is almost 1 trillion of gigabytes. And in the next decade, from 2003 to 2013, it has been a huge transition. We could generate half a zettabyte of data in 2 days. And by 2025, we estimate that we'll have 181 zettabyte of data. And now comes the question of, do we have to protect all these data? Or does all the data has the same value? And how do you actually govern or have some compliance mechanisms for all these data? We'll be discussing all these things today in this presentation with you. And when it comes to cloud native data protection challenges, we call it 3 Cs. First is the complexity. The complexity comes in the form of silos. If you take AWS, for example, we have backups across all the services. We have RDS, EFS, EC2, and databases, etc., etc. And all these things will have their own backup functionalities. And if you have to group all these things together, you have to write your own custom scripts or use ProServe to build your custom solution. And all these things will add to the complexity piece of this here. And when it comes to compliance, you have to manually group all these data from different services which you have, which is essentially, okay, are we backing up all the services which are actually required? And it's a very messy process where you can forget some of the services or some of the useful data which you have to actually store. And all these will also have maintenance of backups, etc., etc. So this adds the compliance piece of it. And when it comes to the cost, we have cost in various segments. One is like you need to build a tech solution so that you can track all these or govern everything in a centralized form, etc., etc. And this takes a lot of human resources and their valuable time. And today we'll be seeing how the AWS Backup can address all these 3 Cs and how you can seamlessly use it on the AWS console. When it comes to strategies for data protection, we can see a horizontal scale here. On the left end, we have backup and restore, followed by pilot light, warm standby, and multi-site active. All these have differing RPOs and RTOs. Those are the SLAs in the backup world. And all these will also cost you different amounts. So when it comes to backup and restore, these are low priority use cases. And as you move to the right side, those are the critical data which you want to back up, and your RPOs and RTOs will increase. What is RPO? RPO stands for Recovery Point Objective, where it talks about what is the minimum data which you want to, or which you're willing to lose. And RTO stands for Recovery Time Objective, how soon after a disaster you want to recover all the data. And depending on your priorities and what sort of data you want to back up, you'll have different strategies for this one. And today, our major focus will be on backup and restore here, which is also the most cost-effective solution. And across AWS, we offer multiple solutions, which will cover the entire band, which you can see it here. Today, Marcos will discuss a few use cases here, which are like cloud native backups and how we are going to ensure the compliance for this, and what are the usual disaster recovery solutions or architectures which we have in place with AWS Backup.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashwar. So let's start talking about one use case here. The first use case that we'll talk or discuss right now is around a cloud native solution. So now we're talking about those customers that are designing solutions, are designing products that are born in the cloud. They are designed from scratch to be available in a cloud environment with all the resiliency, all the flexibility, and all the elasticity required from a cloud environment. For those customers, and here we're not talking about data centers or private cloud, we are talking about the cloud. Um, those customers are taking advantage of managed services and uh, virtual instances running on the cloud. When they need to protect the environment, so I have here a few examples on the left-hand side of the presentation, a few examples of databases, right? So I have Dynamo, I have Redshift, I have Aurora, I have RDC. I still have EC2 instances that could be running Oracle inside of it or Microsoft SQL inside of it. So for all those type of resource, as Ashwar mentioned, we need a simple way to manage and to protect that resource in a central fashion. So for that example, we have AWS Backup playing a key role here as a central point of management for that data protection strategy. AWS Backup, and I will deep dive in that solution in a few slides, will protect those resources, we'll create recovery points, and then we'll send that recovery points to the backup vault. As you can see here in the storage section, we have what we call AWS Backup Vault. That's the repository. It's a logical repository. I will talk a little bit more about the vaults in a few slides. But with that repository, you are able to organize your backups and protect them. You can see here just above the AWS backup that we have AWS organizations. For customers that are facing the challenge of managing multiple accounts, so they have thousands, hundreds of accounts that they have to manage in a central way, they can take advantage of the integration of AWS Backup with AWS Organization. And I will deep dive on that concept soon. After you protect your resource here in the storage, you are able to using AWS Backup to restore them back to the proper resource that you want to restore after disaster or for test purposes or for migration purposes. For any reason, you can just restore your data direct to the resource. You probably notice here on the right hand side when you look to the secondary region that I have here. So I am doing what we call a cross-region replication. I'm copying my backups from my backup vault on the local region to a secondary region. This way, I'm creating a separated or a segregated access to the data. So I have the production on one region, and I have the backups in a separated region, creating this physical isolation of regions. This is required for some industries and required for some use cases where a separation off-site is required for my backups. I need my backups to be somewhere else. So in this case here with AWS Backup, you can automate the creation of copies of your backup to a secondary region. Let's talk a little bit more about AWS Backup. So AWS Backup is a fully managed service. And by managed service, I mean you don't have to deal with all the undifferentiated heavy lifting of provisioning servers, network infrastructure, licensing, agents, nothing like that. All you have to do is opt in. You select which services you want to protect, and you turn the key, you start using it. Second aspect about AWS Backup is policy-based, which means that you can create a set of backup plans, policies, if you may, and then deploy those policies all over your accounts and protect multiple resources and multiple services at the same time using the same policy. For that reason, AWS Backup will create a central management that will not just manage your backups in a single dashboard, but also will allow you to automate your life cycle. So things like deleting the backup after XYZ days or weeks or months, you don't have to deal with that task anymore. The automation, once you define the policy, will take care of the life cycle for your recovery points. Finally, AWS Backup protect multiple AWS services. Right now, as you can see here, we support all storage services available on AWS. So block storage with EBS, object storage with S3, multiple flavors of file storage like FSX family, EFS are supported by AWS Backup as well. Beyond that, also compute services like EC2 instances, data transfer services like storage gateway that will allow you to create a hybrid scenario with your on-premises side. Databases, we have a comprehensive list of database supported right now, and we are increasing that list as customer requires more services to be supported. Applications, so when you go to your EC2 instance, if you are running, for example, volume VSS, volume shadow copies, or you are using SAP HANA running on EC2 instance, we have integration with AWS Backup that allow you to create an application consistent backup of those resources. Also, VMware is supported both on premises and on the cloud, running on cloud, VMware Cloud on AWS. And finally, management. So you are able to protect cloud formations, application consistent, a backup for the entire cloud formation that you have in place. So let's talk about how AWS Backup works, right? As I've mentioned before, you have to opt in and select the services that you want to protect. So you go there and select which compute, storage, database services you will protect using AWS Backup. Once you do that, the next step is creating what we call a backup plan. Remember that I've mentioned that AWS Backup is policy based. So that's where you create the policy. That's where you define the backup plan. The backup plan will contain things like the frequency of your backups, the retention, where your backups will be saved to, if they are saved to a vault that's local in another region or in another account. You define all those parameters on the backup plan. And then you deploy that backup plan to start protecting your resource. You can further integrate your backups with other AWS primitive services such as CloudTrail, CloudWatch, SNS that will provide you tools to create notifications, logging, audit trail, and integrate with other systems that you have in place. Talking about integration, AWS Backup will integrate with AWS organizations. As I've mentioned on the architecture before, you are able to create single policies on the organization level and deploy those policies to multiple accounts. Also, you are able to create copies of your backup, not just cross-region, but also cross-account within the same organization. Every single backup is saved to a local repository called Backup Vault. Backup Vault is a logical construct. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a few slides, but it's where your backups are saved. We created the Backup Vault for two reasons. For simplicity, so you can organize your backups, you can create vaults according to your business requirements, business units, SLAs, and then reuse those vaults according to your backup plans. The second reason is security. We create the backup vault to create an isolation from the abstraction layer of the vault and the storage underneath. This way, we don't have to expose the access to the storage, and you can better control the access to your backups. This way, you can activate or define control access via IAM policies, so you can allow or deny access to your vaults according to your business requirements. Finally, it's important to prove that you are following the regulation and governance that you have in place. So AWS Backup Audit Manager, which I'll talk a little bit later, will give you this option to provide reports that will show if your backups are following the rules and the compliance regulations that you have in place. The second use case that I want to share with you today, we have customers on the healthcare industry, we have customers on the financial industry. For example, one of the biggest financial institutions in North America is using AWS Backup right now to centralize their backups. But they start they had an additional requirement to go beyond just protect. They need to prove that they are protecting their backups. So that financial company came to us with that requirement, and the answer for that was Backup Audit Manager. So as you can see here, the same way you centralize your backups, also you have a tool that you centralize your compliance requirements. So with AWS Backup Audit Manager, it will automatically continuously track everything that's happening on your backup environment. You have the option to create some custom controls or some frameworks that will follow the requirements for your regulatory needs. For example, if the resources are protected by a backup plan, or if the recovery points are encrypted, or if cross-region backup is used, or cross-account, and so on. So you define those custom controls, and you create frameworks around them, and then Backup Audit Manager will continually track everything that's happening on your environment and making sure that they are following the postures that you predefine. If anything on your environment drifts off that posture, you will be notified. You cannot create and trigger events and create events that will generate messages on SNS, for example. And also you are able to generate reports on demand and periodic reports that will show which resources on your environment are following and which are not following the requirements that you have in place. Still on the compliance discussion, recently during reInvent to 2022, we have launched a few new features for our AWS Backup Audit Manager. So now you are able to create and generate frameworks for your compliance needs across multiple accounts and multiple regions. So you don't have to create it individual on the accounts anymore. Now you can create that and centralize for your entire organization. The second launch we had during reInvent was the option to create what we call legal holds. I will talk about Vault Lock in a few minutes, but with legal holds, you are able to prevent the deletion of backup for legal situations where you need to prevent the data to be deleted for beyond the retention period. And finally, now we are certified, our Vault Lock is certified with Cohasset certification for several industry regulations such as SEC 17A, FINRA, and CFTC. So wrapping up, Audit Manager will continually track everything that's happening on your backup environment, will compare your postures, your predefined postures against your environment, and will generate reports that you can share to your auditors or for third-party auditors for your data governance or your compliance requirement. Still on the compliance discussion, I've mentioned a Vault Lock. I've mentioned the vaults before. So the vaults are the logical constructs that you use to access or to save your backups. You can control the access on the vault level. You can set encryption to the vault in the vault level as well. For some services, you can reuse that encryption for the backups, and also you can protect any type of tampering on that vault using vault access policies. But if you need a further way of protecting your backups, we have launched last year Vault Lock. So Vault Lock will give you the ability to activate immutability on your vaults. Once you activate that, anything, any deletion, any change to that vault is not authorized, no matter what user you are using. Even if it's a root account or administration account, you cannot delete or tamper with the retention of the backups inside that vault. We have right now 3 modes of retention for Backup Vault Lock. The first one is governance, which means you can still make authorize some users to make changes to the vault. You have the compliance mode that will completely protect your vault against any type of change, no matter what user you have. When you activate the compliance mode, you have the option to define a grace period where you still can do some changes, but after that, your vault is locked, cannot be changed no matter what user, not even AWS support will be able to unlock your vaults. And finally, the legal that I've just mentioned before is the option to hold your backups beyond the retention period for legal reasons. Finally, the third scenario that I would like to discuss is disaster recovery. And in this case here, let's talk about a hybrid disaster recovery. And by hybrid, I mean traditional data center taking advantage of the cloud to create a disaster recovery scenario. And I have here two possible scenarios. Let's start with the one on the left-hand side, where I have a more of a traditional backup approach with a larger RTO and RPO. So in that scenario here, I have traditional customers using traditional backup solutions, those media servers, those agents, everything that you are familiar if you have a data center. But instead of pointing that backup to a local repository, to an appliance, or to a tape library locally, you point them to the cloud. And we have many options to do that, to point your backups to AWS. First, storage gateway, which allow you to create a disk that will replicate the content of that disk locally to the cloud. Still on the storage gateway family, we have the VTL, or the virtual tape library. This type of gateway will create an emulation for tape libraries on your environment. So when you point your backup software, they will think they are writing to a tape library, where they are really writing to a emulation that will send the data over to the cloud in a S3 bucket or an S3 Glacier vault. Also, you can take advantage of some of our backup solutions partners available on Marketplace. So some of them have options that you can use as a target for your backups that will push the data to the cloud. And finally, Backup Gateway. Backup Gateway is a solution from AWS Backup that integrates with Storage Gateway to allow you to protect VMware resources. So your VMware virtual machines running on premises will be backed up to a backup vault, similarly to the EC2 instances and all the storage and all the databases that you have on the cloud as well. So you have a single dashboard to manage your backups on the cloud and also your VMware's virtual machine running on premises. So this is the traditional backup approach. Let's think about some customer, and I have a long list of SMB, small medium business companies that they have a source location, they have a data center, but they don't have a secondary data center, and they need a solution to provide them disaster recovery, but not within hours, but within minutes or seconds if possible. So for those customers, instead of going to a secondary data center, they can take advantage of AWS Cloud. So using Elastic DRS, which is our disaster recovery solution, they are able to installing agents on their data centers for their storage or for the databases or operational systems, and that agent will continuously replicate the data towards AWS. But the trick here to make this a pilot light scenario, or a scenario where you don't have to pay for the entire infrastructure on the AWS cloud until you have a disaster recovery situation, is to use what we call lightweight servers. So we have low-cost storage and lightweight servers receiving the data continuously from your production, and this will the charge for that environment will be less than the real environment, and you just need to incur that cost on the real cost of the entire environment whenever you activate your disaster recovery, and AWS Elastic DRS will automatically spin up the resource on the servers and then the storage side according to your requirements. So this way you have a pilot light disaster recovery situation using your traditional or a hybrid environment, your traditional data center, and the cloud as a repository for your disaster recovery scenario. With that, I conclude my list of use cases that I would like to share with you. And now I will go back to Azure so we can talk about how the challenges that we discussed in the beginning can be addressed with AWS Backup. Back to you, Ashwar.
Thanks, Marcos. Thanks for describing all the use cases and helping us. So, when it comes to AWS Backup, to summarize it, we unified backing up across different AWS services, and we're solving the complexity, compliance, and the cost, which are the three C's which are associated with data protection. When it comes to complexity, we use policy-based, tag-based backups, which essentially will ensure your scheduling, your data retention policies, and also track your compliance purposes. For compliance, we have Backup Audit Manager, which can actually track whether all the resources are getting backed up, and it can also generate reports, which you can also use for compliance purposes or governance purposes. All these while you're encrypting your backups in the backup vault lock. And all these comes without any cost. For many services we offer we add no additional charge for the backup price itself. So it's just the backup storage which you're paying with other services as it is. So we're addressing all these three C's with AWS Backup today. when it come to when it comes to customers who actually benefit most with AWS backup, we see a variety of customers. There are customers who wants to optimize their compliance by standardizing the way they want to protect it across the organization. And they're also optimizing for efficiency without using any scripts, custom made solutions, just by using AWS backup. And it also improves the productivity and also protect them against insider threats or ransomware attacks with the help of like AWS Vault Lock. And all these things can be done in a centralized way where you have a single interface where you can see all the resources and also govern as well as like monitor all those backups and restores. And if you want to learn more, we have a variety of platforms here. You can use AWS Skill Builder for actually generating your learning plans and also track your learning. Or if you want to ramp up your knowledge, you can increase your knowledge by using like ramp up guides, which are there in our website, as you can see here. And you also get badges, digital badges, where you can demonstrate, like, I have been certified with this one. So all these you can find it at aws.training/storage here. And thank you, Marcos, and I are open for any questions if you have any.
Thank you all.